All right. Good morning, Doug. First of all, I want to talk to our subscribers for a second and tell them thank you. We have over 10,000 subscribers now. We've been doing this for about 4 months, a little over 4 months, I think. And the channel has certainly grown. But one of the interesting things is that people complaining about how they can't believe how small our viewership actually is. So while I'm appreciative of the fact that we have 10,000 now, lots of people think it's still small. And I got to tell you, if you're a subscriber and you like what we're doing, you have to like the videos and you have to share them in order for YouTube's algorithm to more broadly distribute it. So if you really want this information more broadly distributed, people, then you really need to like it and share it with the people as much as you can. But still, we're happy. 10,000 subscribers is, we're just two guys in different places talking about things that interest us, and we're happy to have that. So today we want to talk about. Go ahead, Doug.
It's intellectually stimulating. It's intellectually stimulating for us. We don't have, I guess you can monetize everything today. We haven't monetized this, and we haven't advertised this. So it's all been kind of word of mouth, hasn't it, Matt?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there have been some people who've been really supportive. People like Jeff Rick has referred people here. The Uneducated Economist has referred some people here. I think George Gammon referred some people here. So we've benefited from a couple of tips of the hat, I guess, from those guys. But fundamentally, it's organic growth, and it's interesting.
Yeah, well, it's kind of gratifying. I was talking earlier today with my friend and colleague, Nick Giambruno, and we were commiserating with each other about the sad state of the world, the fact that the Bolsheviks have captured Washington and they're never going to go away. And, we were talking about the sad state of advertising on TV, where they're trying to jam up a political point of view down your throat as they're selling soap suds or whatever the hell it is they're selling. And I guess we came to the conclusion, I believe this, everything is Pareto's law, of course, the 80-20 rule. And my guess is that people that basically have a very free market, laissez-faire, anarcho-capitalist view of the world, live and let live, if you would, we're way at one side of that bell-shaped curve. Which is to say, let's see, 80-20, and then you take 20% of the 20 and you get 4%. So we're probably down there with about 4% of the population. So it's never going to be a mass thing from that point of view. And then, and the problem is on the other side of that bell-shaped curve, you got people that have precisely the opposite views. I mean, I guess that would be people like Nancy Pelosi and AOC. And I put my finger on these political people simply because those are exactly the kind of people that are drawn into politics because they like to tell other people what to do. So I guess the situation is actually pretty hopeless from that point of view, because here we are over here, and there they are over there, and they've got all the power. And of course they have all the power, because they direct themselves towards an institution that does that for a living. So I don't know, maybe there's no way out. I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, I think one of the big challenges is that people like us, with the sort of live and let live belief, we're not interested in trying to coerce even the most evil versions of these people. Like, we're not, like, just leave us alone. You mind our own business. Don't hurt, us or the people we care about or the things that are important to us. But we're not trying to coerce. And on the other side, the coercion is the name of the game. And so it's a lopsided battle in a way, because we won't even bother. Like, we're not even interested in engaging in the way that they would. So yeah, it's
yeah, it is. On the other hand, I always like to say I look at the bright side of things. People don't believe that because I mostly talk about.
I know you do that. I know.
But frankly, maybe the world has gone from a state of 100% theft in medieval and primeval times, when men couldn't create anything and all we could do is fight with each other for a dead animal for food and maybe take the animal's skin and wear, it was basically all, there was no creation, in other words. There was no actually production of values. We've gone from a world that was really horrible in Paleolithic times from some points of view. And now perhaps we've advanced to a world of only 50% theft, where you're only expected to give half of what you create to people that have done nothing to deserve it. So maybe things are getting better. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. I think one of the things that I think is probably most interesting about the idea of I guess I'm most hopeful about, is that these people who are drawn to this power, ultimately they end up eating each other anyway. And so, if we can manage to just step back enough and allow them to do their destructive behavior, they end up creating more chaos and more destruction for themselves, and destroying the resources that they have. And perhaps they do that to the extent where people more on our end of things can then later step in and repair and fix allocate the resources properly and create value again. That's my hope anyway.
Well, a reasonable hope, not an unreasonable hope anyway, but I'm finishing up watching, I mentioned it briefly yesterday, House of Cards, which is actually a fascinating series because I lived in Washington for 20 years and I got to know lots of these people in lots of ways, living right in the heart of the beast. And the fact is, House of Cards, very popular series, and it's talking about the worst damn people in the world. And it demonstrates how it's a snake pit, how all of them despise each other, are purely destructive, they're criminal. I mean, overtly and covertly. Popular series, and people see this. In fact, it talks about the Democratic Party, which is especially appropriate because the Republican Party are just like, Me Too.
Too, but not so fast.
Spaghetti spine. I mean, they stand for nothing. So it was good they chose the Democratic Party, but apparently the writers all have democratic values where they have these people mouthing all these absolutely insane programs, but it shows they're all criminals and nobody cares because the next election, people go out and vote for their politician. I guess there's really no hope. I mean, but wait a minute, maybe there is, because what we were going to talk about was education and whether that is a ray of hope in this. And you pointed out that when we were touching on this the other day, one, or was it more than one, of our listeners drew our attention to John Taylor Gatto, right?
More than one. I'd say it's our multiple bringing up of education over the last few months. At least half a dozen people have brought him up, and I wasn't familiar with him at all.
No, I wasn't either. I'd seen his name probably on Lou Rockwell. LouRockwell.com publishes 10 to 12, 15 articles every day. And I think I've seen his name there, but I don't have time to read, that many articles a day. So I've just seen his name. But the guy is just brilliant and he's spot on. So I guess we decided we were going to talk about his ideas of education since he's been good enough to structure them for us.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the interesting things, one of the positive things that comes out of these very destructive government efforts is when that they reveal themselves. It exposes the problems, and certainly with all the COVID hysteria and education and the problems in education have been totally revealed to parents, millions and millions of parents that would otherwise have just kind of sat idly by and just assumed they were doing the right thing by sending their kids to school, have now been confronted with the fact that it's a fraud. I mean, it's just a disaster. Forget about the indoctrination. Just the education that's happening there is awful. And you add the indoctrination to it, and it's just unbelievable. Plus, then you have the fact that the teachers unions clearly don't prioritize students, which people, if you're paying attention, have known this for a while, but it was never in such stark relief. And so there's a big opening for John's ideas today and ideas like his. And so why don't you tell me some of the things that stood out to you in your review of his work?
Well, okay. And incidentally, when we were talking about this off camera the other day, we mentioned the fact that he's actually got experience as a teacher, and that gave him credibility because he's actually walked the walk, not just talk the talk. The fact of the matter is that I was a teacher for a while, both in Washington, D.C., where I was a substitute teacher, mostly in the combat zone, where they mostly needed. These were Black schools that were, I mean, the kids, if they went to class, were probably criminals when they weren't. I mean, they were tough. I mean, the ghetto in DC is,
Tough.
an unpleasant place for the kids and for everybody else. Well, I did that. And then after I was actually a sixth grade teacher in Hobart, Indiana, which is steel country, for 6 months. I did that in an attempt to put together that $5,000 I spoke about to hitchhike through South America, something which is probably very hard to do today and was pretty easy to do then. Anyway, so I've got some experience about the practicality of teaching. And okay, so where should we start? Because there was a list of 10 things that you noted.
Yeah, the thing that really stood out to me in it is mostly because this relates to our talk about this book we're contemplating writing called Renaissance Man, as he has these 10 characteristics of an educated person. And I thought that this really, it reminded me of a lot of the concepts for that book. And I can just kind of go through them real quick and you can respond to them.
Absolutely. I wonder if he covered all the bases, because I listened to his excellent podcast. It runs an hour and 17 minutes. And as I was commenting to you, I suggest people listen to it at 1.5 speed or even 1 3/4 speed, because he talks slowly. And when things happen faster, it makes you concentrate more. So just a word to the wise, and we can post the link for that.
Yeah, I'll definitely include the link. It's a recorded talk he did, I believe, that was just published on.
That's right. It was a recording, right?
So let's see. One thing he says is that an educated person can write their own script, or at least a large part of it. He or she is self-determined. And that's one of that's number one, I guess, in his list of the traits of an educated person. And I guess that's in contrast to being a victim of circumstances.
Look, I'm thinking that's a big one, just being self-determined. And I'm thinking, I always went to quote unquote good schools. They were parochial schools. And, so it was, I guess I had better than the average teacher, but no teacher actually presented that idea. I mean, all these teachers through all of my schooling, almost all of them basically just repeated what was in the book. And there was no room for interpretation and how does this relate to you and what are you going to do about it to make it personal? It's just like they were, imparting some knowledge, which is kind of meaningless. And first things first.
Good.
Kids have got to have a philosophical education. To understand how to understand before they just have randomly assembled facts spewed at them. And I think about what happened to me in the 16 years of formal education I had, and most of it was a waste of time from that point of view. I would have been much better off by myself.
I mean, it's a hard idea for people to grasp that the education that you would be, school systems might not be great, but that you would actually be better off if it just didn't exist at all. And, I was reading some of his book yesterday, one of his books yesterday, John Taylor Gatto's. And, he said in it that in Massachusetts is where it's essentially our industrial school system was introduced in Massachusetts, and he said he was reporting something that Ted Kennedy's office said, which was that the literacy rate for Massachusetts before compulsory education was 98%. After compulsory education, the literacy rate has never exceeded, at least up till 1990 when this was written, 91%. So compulsory education actually reduced in Massachusetts. And maybe that's, of course, it could be multiple factors, but the idea that you needed to have compulsory education to make sure that Americans could read and write is just disproven on its face by the fact that the literacy rate was so high in advance of all that.
Yeah, exactly. And, it used to be said that going to school was about reading, writing, and arithmetic. And actually, that's the basis of all you need, because once you learn how to read, and you should be able, I think everybody basically learns how to read by the time they're in third grade, and write so you can express yourself, and use math, literacy, and numeracy. And after that, what good is sitting behind a desk for 7 hours a day, having somebody of probably marginal competence yap at you? I know when I was a 6th grade teacher in Hobart, Indiana, I didn't associate with any of the other teachers because I thought they were idiots, frankly. I mean, they were basically teaching because they weren't qualified for actually doing anything. That old saying, those who can do, those who can't teach. Well, there's some truth to that, certainly when we're talking about the public school system. And Gatto is certainly an exception to that, because I guess he was a teacher for 30 years.
Yeah, 30 years.
Which initially made me suspicious of what he was saying, because, well, wait a minute, how can you be a teacher? I guess he was a high school teacher for that period of time. Isn't this if you're really smart, isn't this a misallocation of your time? But if you're interested in something, no, I guess not. But most teachers aren't. It's a job. It's a union job for most teachers.
Exactly. So his second one was an educated man or woman knows the ways of the human heart so well that they're hard to cheat or fool. And he actually takes that from Thomas Jefferson's diaries. Thomas Jefferson's diary, where basically, just if you understand people well enough, if you understand what motivates people, their psychology and all of that, you're less prone to being fooled or cheated.
Yeah, and that's a good reason to read well-written novels, because since I've gotten into writing novels myself, I find that novels give you a platform to explore the innards of human psychology, of the human heart, of the human mind, in a way that you can't in nonfiction, because if you try to do it in nonfiction, it becomes kind of academic. And so he's quite correct. Part of being educated is like Socrates said. Well, actually, it wasn't just Socrates that said it. It was one of the things that at the oracle at Delphi, they had 3 things that you know yourself. Anyway, they say Socrates said it, but it was actually much older than that. But yes, know yourself. That's part of being an educated person. That's why reading novels, if they're well written, is part of the process of being an education. If you've got a good author who likes to explore these things.
Well, and you do a lot in your books. And so I'm going to do a little plug, because the audiobook version of Assassin is out now. It's been out for about 10 days now, something like that. So a lot of our viewers were waiting for that to be released. So you can go to Amazon and you can get the audiobook version of Assassin now. I obviously encourage you all to do that.
And incidentally, John Hunt, my co-author, who's a very hands-on guy, kind of a Renaissance man in his own right, no question about that, found a reader that actually shares our values. And for what it's worth, the reader for Assassin and the other books, I think it's the same guy, has said that, yeah, I don't get along with any of the other readers because we all know each other because we're like a group of guys that are in the same business. None of the other readers have the same philosophical views that I do and you guys do. So once again, further proof that we're a minority. Anecdotal, but there it is.
That's lots of evidence everywhere we look for that, though. So the third one he has, it also comes from Thomas Jefferson. He says that a educated man or woman
knows their rights and knows how to defend those rights. And this is the one that really hit me pretty hard the other day when we were talking about this, because if you remember, I was befuddled by the lack of, by the fact that these small business owners who are being destroyed by the state all over the United States, we're just kind of buckling under and just going with the flow. And it's like, and I'm like, I couldn't believe that they weren't rising to their own defense, just not violently, but just like standing up for their rights in some way. And, I guess when I read this, I go, well, if we don't have an educated population, they don't understand their rights and they don't understand how to defend those rights. And this one really hit home for me.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. These people that are being bulldozed by these insane COVID actions of various governments, they're just rolling over. I mean, they grouse and they grumble about it and they don't like it, but they don't feel like they have moral right on their side.
Right.
Because they've never had an opportunity. They've never been instructed as to, what people have thought about what's right and wrong throughout history. And there's never been a discussion of whether, somebody that asserts this is right, this approach to life is right. No, nobody ever discusses these things. So of course they just roll over and do what they're told. Yeah, absolutely correct. It's an elephant in the room. It's such a big thing. Nobody even thinks about it.
Right. And then John Taylor Gatto talks about this. He says that, that the school system, the education system is designed fundamentally to teach the role of authority, in people's lives. And then, so it's following authority. And so what people are essentially, they replace, sort of a discussion internally about what's right and wrong with whether or not someone has the authority to tell them what to do. Not whether they have the right to, not whether what they're doing is right or wrong. But if you're in an authority position, the school system naturally teaches you to subjugate yourself to that authority.
The very fact that you have to sit in orderly rows and do as you're told, put your book away. If you need to go to the bathroom, you have to ask permission. I mean, this is very subtle that from an early age, you're taught to not to act like a responsible human being, but like an automaton that needs permission for everything. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'll just try and get through some of these rest of these pretty quickly. Number 4 is that an educated man or woman possesses useful knowledge. They know how to build a house, or how to write a song, or how to make a boat, or how to grow food, or how to design clothing. They know something real, and if there's something that they don't know, they know that they can learn it, and they know how to go about learning it.
And one of the best points that he makes under that subcategory is that, we all live in houses, and I've got to say, I've fallen down this way. Did you know that he pointed out there's something called the Shelter Institute in Bath, Maine, where if you go there for a month, you will learn how to build a house. In other words, from the foundation to the rooftop, you'll do it and understand how these fit together and so forth. And a couple of weeks more, you can take other courses that they have on how to do the electrical and plumbing of a house. This is an immense store of knowledge. This is so useful, whether you're going to become a real estate agent or buy a house, which is the biggest thing. If you actually know how to build a house, you're way ahead of everybody else, and you can pick up all this knowledge in 6 weeks. That is a valuable 6 weeks, as opposed to just sitting in some class listening to somebody lecture, because you're doing this stuff. I mean, it's actually genius that somebody would point this out and nobody thinks about it.
Nobody thinks about it. It also makes you
No.
wonder what 3 weeks or whatever it was to build the house outside of the electrical and the plumbing. So say 6 weeks total. I mean, can you have a house built anywhere for in 6 weeks? I mean, I don't know. It makes you wonder what we're doing wrong. If a newbie can basically with some instruction build a house in that period of time.
And we'll have to talk about his comments on the old order Amish too, which
Yes.
has a lot to do with building your own house because that's what they do. But what was the next point then?
The next one would be that an educated man or woman can form healthy attachments anywhere they go because they understand the dynamics of relationships. He says, I'm not saying that it's a desirable thing, but you could extract an educated person and put them down somewhere else and they'll find their way instead of shriveling up or going to ground. And I think this goes right into with your idea of, as a young person going, leaving the country, going to Africa or going to Latin America, just to kind of, expand your opportunities. And, if you're not educated in his context with this, you would fail immediately because you wouldn't be able to form these, positive relationships with other people.
That's right. It's not just a question of knowing how your family thinks, but knowing how people from other cultures think and so forth. Yeah, exactly right. But that doesn't form part of the education of the average American at all. I mean, it's academic. These people that you might have to get to know and deal with, they're just words on a page or what a politician among them did. It's not an actual education into the psychology of the way people act and work. I was thinking, one of the best shows on TV that I think illustrates this is The Mentalist with, who is that actor? His name is, anyway, The Mentalist. Ever seen that?
Yes, I have. It's a good show.
Fantastic. Fantastic show. Very well written, extremely well acted. And part of the education of a kid would be living with carnival people for a summer, just so they become very familiar with the aberrant ways a mind can work and how criminal tendencies evidence themselves and scam artists and this type of thing. I would have loved to have been in a carnival for a summer sometime.
Yep.
I mean, just as an apprentice, just as a roustabout, pulling up tents or whatever the hell they do. That's fine. Don't need any pay.
Exactly. The thing is that our society today denies young people those opportunities. I mean, even to like my son's 15, wants to work. He can't work. Like no one will, like Colorado. No one wants to hire 16-year-olds or 15-year-olds. They want to wait till you're 16.
Union rules, liability laws. Yeah.
What's minimum wage is like $13 an hour. Like, and he's new. Like he's not worth $13 an hour. I mean, who is? When they're just starting off.
Exactly. Look, when I was a kid growing up in Chicago, I wanted to work. I was about 7 or 8 years old, just a little kid. And I wanted to work because I wanted to have my own money. I wanted to buy stuff, the type of stuff that a 7 or 8 year old kid wants to buy. So my mother took me down to the local Kresge's in Chicago. And I've got to say, God bless her. She asked for the store manager and told the store manager I'd like a job. And the store manager explained to me that it wasn't possible and gave me whatever reasons, but he was a very nice guy. I remember it to this day. Jesus, this is a long time ago. And he told me why he couldn't hire me, even though I just wanted to work in the store and the money wasn't important. I could have paid me 10 cents an hour. I would have been overjoyed. Yeah, that's right. It was a law. He said it was the law, actually. So this guy, whoever he was, had a major influence on my thinking because he basically said, hey, it's the law. We can't hire you.
Right. Yeah. The thing that saved me is a paper route. So I had a paper route when I was 8 years old and had that until I was 15 and could get somebody, finally somebody could hire me at that age and to work in some fast food place. And then, but as I was always working as much as possible, and paper route was the one thing, I guess, that was still allowed, for child labor. But those are gone.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I guess they are going. Yes, they are. Definitively, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, and even
I
for
used
you,
to sell magazines door to door. No, kids don't sell magazines or Christmas cards. Did that too, selling them door to door, because I don't think those things exist anymore, really.
no, but
So,
that young door-to-door sales type stuff is so good for people too, by the way. You know, it's like you learn this stuff as a kid. For me, with newspapers, you actually had to go collect the money from the customers that you'd been delivering the papers to. So as an 8-year-old, you have a bill you have to pay to the newspaper company for all the papers they were delivering to you over the last 2 weeks. And in order for you to pay that bill, you have to go and collect it door by door for everybody you've been delivering to. And so, a lot of times people aren't home, and a lot of times people they don't really want to pay. And so you end up being a collection agent at 8 years old, which seems crazy, that they have you do that, but you learn a lot. You learn a lot by doing that. Can't do it anymore, unfortunately.
yeah. Well, we better make that illegal somehow. I mean, don't want people thinking for themselves. What's the next thing that Gatto says?
Okay. Very relevant to these times. Number 6 is an educated person can discover truth without following the lead of experts. Not to say that in many cases that's exactly what you would do, but you always reserve some skepticism that what you're being told is the whole truth. You know how to compare different accounts.
Yes, and just because somebody has technical knowledge doesn't mean that he has wisdom, knowing how to apply it and how it fits in, and whether that technical knowledge should be used in a given way.
Right.
Big difference between wisdom and knowledge. Right.
Exactly. And I mean, to be honest, today, I think you have to question even the good faith of people who are experts. I mean, are they even coming to the table with good faith? They might have the knowledge, but is what they're saying just just because they have the credentials does not mean that they have the right answers. So,
yeah. And one of the problems with this is it's delegitimizing the actual idea and concept of science, because some idiot is saying something as a scientist, but it's wrong. It delegitimizes the very idea of science. So this has got really deep-rooted problems.
Okay, number 7 is an educated person has the capacity to create things, new experiences, new ideas. They can make something out of something else. They can see the raw material around them that's common, and they can use it to create new things.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. I mean, and a part of that is the psychological attitude of feeling that if you're able to do that, if you have the knowledge of the way the world works and how atoms fit together with each other into molecules and making stuff, and then you could be dropped into the jungle in the Congo and not only survive, but owning half the place. That's important. You got to be able to do stuff. I think Elon Musk's, I don't know what his personal philosophy might be. I mean, he kind of seems libertarian leaning in a lot of things that he says, but who knows? I mean, but one of the great things that he said is, if you want to have stuff, you have to make stuff. I don't think we even consider something as obvious as that. They think like there's a magic cornucopia that gives them stuff.
You just go to the store.
Make it.
You just go to the store. It's there. The stuff you want
to the store. Right. Yeah, it's like magic. It's thinking like a primitive person, totally uneducated, where just like magic happens. Cargo cults in the South Pacific, where even today, because I've been there a number of times, they have a religion, a cargo cult religion on islands, especially in the old New Hebrides, Vanuatu, where guys will build model airplanes because they think that that's going to encourage what happened during World War II, where they used to drop stuff from parachutes and the natives got a lot of it. Yeah, I mean, I know modern Americans are thinking like cargo cult people.
Exactly. Yeah, that's interesting. That's a great metaphor, a great analogy for that, because that is what it is. People don't understand how things come to be. When we talked before about how people in, Los Angeles and, inner city Los Angeles or whatever, didn't even know where milk came from. They thought the milk came in cartons, like that it was manufactured somehow, and they don't understand it came from cows.
Yeah. And chocolate milk must come from brown cows. Who the hell knows? I mean, it's not even thinking. It's so irrational, and it's not that these people lack intelligence. It's just that, anyway, what was the next one?
So the next one was also very important. Number 8 is an educated man or woman possesses a blueprint of personal value. So, essentially that, let's see, let me get to this. I'm skipping some parts here. So 1 second. So an educated man or woman knows at all times who he or she is. I can say, I have a philosophy that's been clarified through trial and error. Of course, we make mistakes. We're all imperfect, but we strive. And as we strive, we become less imperfect. And this is essentially a moral compass. This is a personal philosophy. This is a sense of right and wrong, knowing who you are and, what matters and what doesn't. And I think having a code almost, something like that.
Yeah. So what kind of a moral code is ingrained into the average American? I mean, I guess if you grow up in a religion, presumably you're taught the 10 Commandments, which are kind of helpful. Got a lot of problems, but who gives people a moral education? What's right and wrong, and why? More importantly, why is it right or wrong or good or bad? I don't think anybody does that. I mean, I'm thinking back through the 16 years of formal schooling I had, and I don't think that was ever really discussed. I was told you shouldn't steal. Okay, that's great. But I want a discussion of why I shouldn't steal. That would have been much more interesting. Told you, thou shalt not kill. But wait a minute. What about this war we're supposed to be supporting?
Exactly.
How does that relate?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But these things are not discussed. They're never discussed. You're just told stuff.
Yeah, I think that the moral teaching that people get today is mostly from the examples that they see in the media, more so than in the education system. I don't think the education system drives it as much as our media and pop culture sort of does. And pop culture feels to me it's kind of it's almost like a nihilistic utilitarian moral philosophy, like if it works, if whatever the result is, if it gets the result that you want, then it's good. Like the consequences of it, there's not really a right and wrong except for whether or not it produces the outcome that you want to achieve.
Yeah, and there's certainly no discussion about the subtleties of these things.
Right.
Yeah,
it's nuanced.
The nuances, exactly. It's a real pity.
Okay, so number 9 is he says this is one of his favorites, is that that time does not hang heavily on an educated person's hands. And he talks about the fact that they can be alone easily, and that there's a very rarely do they experience a sense of boredom.
Yeah, it's not a question of having too much time. It's a question of not having enough time. I mean, times in the past I said, gee, I wish I didn't have to sleep because I could use those 8 hours so much more productively than just being oblivious. And of course, from a scientific point of view, that's incorrect thinking, but it's how I felt.
Me too.
You still do feel sometimes.
A lot of young, ambitious people do feel that way. It's like sleep looks like it's the biggest obstacle to driving their life forward, and so you kind of cut corners where you can, but eventually, you realize sleep's a pretty important thing. The better sleep you get, the better your life is.
Yeah, wasting time and being bored. It's true. It's a question of education and values. Exactly. And good point again. Nobody teaches. Nobody formally emphasizes and teaches these things to kids. And if they figure it out for themselves, they lose years in the process of figuring things out, where if somebody just showed it to them, they wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. They
Right.
could be inventing other much more important, complicated things than having to constantly reinvent the wheel every generation.
Hmm.
That's the value of education.
I think that's a good point. You know, one of the things I love how he basically says that if you feel bored, well, you're the problem. It's you. Rather than it be about that something about the world must change in order to keep me entertained, you know, or to make my life fulfilling. It's that it just turns the camera right on you. And if you want to consider yourself an educated person, if you're feeling boredom, you're not as educated as you thought you should be. So like, what can you do to improve yourself so that boredom is not a factor of your life?
Maybe that's one of the problems with people being on their electronic devices, uh, imbibing entertainment 8 hours a day, because at least when you're reading a book, you're doing something active as opposed to just watching, which is really passive. And yeah, watching a fun show is an antidote to boredom, but it's kind of your fault that you're not entertaining yourself. You're counting on somebody to entertain you.
Exactly. A sign of an uneducated person. So let's see his last one.
Exactly. The whole country is increasingly uneducated. I'm forced to believe that.
Yeah, and we actually started talking about this topic because you were working on a new book, an updated version of your very popular crisis investing book that came out a few decades ago. And you were saying that as you're going through it, that you didn't think you could write it at the same level that you wrote it 30 years ago because the general population, the level of education of them has changed. I think that's what kind of started us thinking about this education stuff.
It's true. Many of the basic concepts, and that was a simple book, quite frankly, but many of the basic concepts that I discussed there would need much more discussion today because they're so much further from the world of the average guy. It's cause for pessimism.
It is. So the last one he had here, which I like this one too. An educated person understands and accepts why death and aging are necessary. I like fighting age and death personally. I like fighting it, but I also understand it's a necessary thing and that a lot of the richness of life comes from the fact that you know it's scarce. It's a scarce resource that should be appreciated and savored and done something with. But he says an educated person learns from each age of their life, even right down to the last age. They're constantly learning and they recognize the value and the importance of death and aging.
That's true. I have a problem with that too, because I'm very pro-life. I don't mean in the popular sense of abortion or not. It's a whole totally different subject. But yeah, I don't like the idea of dying, but I understand the circle of life too. But who knows? I mean, I have no idea. Maybe we're reincarnated and you get to do this all over again. Depends, as we were talking before, whether you're strictly a meat body, or it's possible, as a solipsist, I think anything you can imagine is possible, actually. Maybe you're a spiritual entity that's currently trapped in this physical body, and then you shed it. I don't know. There's all kinds of possibilities, but yes, he's right. It's a good idea, I think, as an education to talk to kids about the circle of life, as it were.
Yeah, I agree. My maybe it was like 5 years ago. My kid's grandmother on their mom's side passed away, and she died at like 83, 84, something like that. She was a great woman, had lived a really good life, had a really great family, uh, and I was trying, and it was hard for them. That was his first death in the family that someone they were close to, and they were young. But I was explaining this is kind of like this is kind of the best case scenario. I mean, she was happy. She created a lot of value in her life. There's a lot of people who loved her that she loved. And, if you look at the track record of her life, it's like best case scenario, and you gotta appreciate that the life is lived well and that life is scarce and, it's okay. It's like, it's normal and natural. And it's part of what makes life beautiful is that scarcity component to it, at least. And like I said, we might be reincarnated in a spiritual sense. And so there might not be any actual scarcity, but our perception of life certainly is one of scarcity. And the scarcity is what makes things more rich and more beautiful as far as I'm concerned.
That's right. And we have to deal in the here and now and things that we can prove and see and feel as opposed to just imagine. So yeah, you're quite correct. And he went into the briefly his lecture about the old order Amish, which I thought was quite interesting, in that he describes their society and how that society sticks together. Of course, I think the religious aspects of it are problematical, and they are kind of self-limiting in the kinds of things that they learn and study. But from a social point of view, it works where, families stay together and everybody is expected to learn a trade and know how to run his own business as opposed to be an employee. And they have a lot of things down. And I think that's one of the reasons for the success of the Mormons. They're not dissimilar to the Amish in a lot of ways, and they're quite successful. And frankly, that has a lot to do with the success of the Jews, who do much better than the average person from an economic point of view, certainly. And there's something to be said for having a family and a cultural bond. And I think a lot of the average Americans, I mean, they don't live in homes really because the parents are away working and they're dropped into a school where who the hell knows what all this rotating rostrum of teachers is yapping at them all day. So the house is no longer, it's not a home, it's just a house. And then they go out into the world in a different part of the country. They don't have any foundation, family, friends that they can rely on. It's there's a lot to be said for these religious traditions, although I'm overtly unreligious, but I've got a lot of respect for the way they've put things together.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the way he describes these, the Amish in Pennsylvania, kind of in the area he grew up in, is pretty, I mean, it's pretty compelling. And I mean, one of the things he talks about that I found interesting is that, for Amish children, as they become adults, they have paid for by the community a 1 year, leave the community, live however you want, violate all of the norms, the cultural norms, the religious norms that we've like taught you since birth. And if you want to come back, come back. And if not, that's fine too. And I think that, just the
it's an active choice. Yeah. Yeah, it's an active choice. I want to be here, not just because I'm told to be here. That's very self-actuating. And I guess to some degree, the Mormons have something like that with their, I think they have a 2-year overseas where they go preaching and all this type of thing. Not quite the same thing, but they're getting some exposure anyway. So,
well, but they're always paired up with someone else too, though, to make sure that they're, choosing the right.
yeah, that's right. No, I'm afraid I wouldn't have lasted long in the Mormon church for all of its virtues, quite frankly.
Was there anything else from
vices? There was one other thing that he brought up. I thought that was very good. He pointed up, he noticed, I guess, when he was driving by on the way to something, there was this woman who had an old truck and she was selling shrimp. Right. And it said, excellent plate of shrimp or something, $10. And
in Hawaii.
Yeah, he noticed this. And then he decided to actually stay at a distance and watch and figure out, like an IRS agent might do. And sometimes they do this type of thing, incidentally. They're looking to, move up the ranks. He figured out how many meals this woman was serving in the course of a day. And then he did some research as to the price of shrimp and the price of propane to cook them and rice and stuff like that. And he figured that out of the $10 she was charging, she was netting $7. And so he added up the numbers, and here she was making $250,000 per year, probably untaxed or mostly untaxed, hopefully, just on her own, informally. And, there are 1,000 things that you can do like that.
Right. almost think our educational system kind of keeps you from considering those things as a possibility. They're almost, I mean, so many jobs in America seem beneath us. You know what I mean? You know, there's a lot of work that people are not willing to do in order to make money. You know, even if if people find themselves unemployed, there's always work. There is work available, and it just might not be the kind of work that you'd want to do, the kind of work that your identity sort of, you feel like you should be doing. But you know, if you don't have that burden of that like identity about how the job you ought to have, you know, it should be a doctor or something like that. Then you start to look around for ways that you can practically create real value with the people, you know, in the world you actually live in. And then that's where great enterprises can flourish. And like the thing about this woman that I got from it is that her standard of living, her quality of life were extremely high. And she had essentially no education. I mean, very, very little education.
Exactly. Not only was she feeling productive and making a whole bunch of money, but she was actually talking to her customers and getting to know these people. And that's kind of fun.
Right. Exactly. There's
She
lots
was
of
enjoying herself, unlike somebody in a fast food kitchen, which is one step up from a robot and will be replaced by a robot. But she couldn't be replaced by a robot. Yeah.
it's good.
Absolutely right.
And there's a lot of good examples in that talk, and I'll link to that in the description. And we're going to try to get John on this with us. And I don't know if we know some people who know him, so we're going to try and connect with him and invite him on with us. And we have a lot more we could talk with him about. If any of our viewers happen to know him or have contact with him, you know, and can help arrange it, we would love it. We just there's a lot of areas we can go into conversation with him, and I think he's got a lot of wisdom to share. So first of all, thank you to the viewers who have introduced him to us. My son is reading one of his books now, and I think there's a lot of great wisdom there. So we'd love to have him on the show.
Exactly. And, you know, I was just thinking that Mike Rowe, who had that show, Dirty Jobs, he's exactly cut from the same cloth. And it seems philosophically, too, when I've read things that he's written and all that. Same thought process, entrepreneurial, free market, self-actuated, and so forth. Yes, exactly correct. And we ought to have Paul Rosenberg on the show, too, because Paul is an excellent modern day philosopher. And he originally, he made his money writing books on trades, how to, you know, facts about, you know, carpentry, plumbing, electrical wiring, stuff like that. So he's got the same background and point of view as well.
Yeah, Eric Hoffer keeps coming up in my mind, I think is a book you recommended recently, but it's kind of that approach. You know, he's such a philosophical guy, and yet he is very in touch with the atoms, the real world around him. And I think it gives him a great perspective on life. And every time we talk to him, it's good. So we'll have him on again too to talk about education. Good.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that's just super.
All right, thanks, Doug. That was fun. I appreciate it. Talk to you tomorrow.
A lot of fun. Thanks, Matt.